Abs- All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for making it today. Hopefully, something will come to be of use from being here and listening to this for you eventually. This is going to be our first sort of at portion of the Gen M career development series. And today we're going to be touching on or really just getting into the legal field by speaking to a few different emerging professionals in the legal field in the UK, the United States, and Canada as well. Hopefully, like I said earlier, again, something may be of use to you in one way or another, be it, the licensing process or school applications, really anything along the whole career path. Hopefully something does kind of come into your own situation if this is something you are personally interested in. Again, just as Jana said earlier, this meeting as well will be recorded and it will be put online on Facebook and YouTube for all of you if you want to go back and specifically rewatch a certain part, or if anybody wasn't able to make it today. Now, to start off, I'll kind of go ahead and give the floor to Jana, or apologize, Emilija, to kind of get into her background.
Hi everyone, my name is Emilija. I was just a bit about me. I was trained in the UK. I'm currently in Toronto and I've lived here my whole life, but I'm back to continue the law, law society process here in Ontario. I'm currently doing my master's in order to undergo the NCA process, which I will talk about in a bit. And I'm about to start articling this summer, hopefully. So that's where I'm at in terms of the process. And I guess we can all just go around and just give a brief overview of what we're all looking for.
Sure. Thank you, Emilija. I will, sorry, just admitting people. I'll start, just give a brief intro as well. So I'm located in and around Toronto, and I studied here at Osgoode Hall University, where I mostly specialized in international, transnational, and comparative law. Right now, I'm preparing to take my bar exams very, very soon. So hopefully that goes well. And I can touch on that a bit more later. Luka, did you want to go ahead and just give a brief intro?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Luka Petrusevski. I'm also based in Toronto. Recently moved here about a year and a half ago for work. I got through the licensing process here in Ontario on my first year call. I studied at Western for my undergrad, my law degree, and my master's of law, during which I focused on, the interaction between commercial interests and environmental interests and a whole heap of other things. And I'm currently practicing in areas of domestic and international trade, with some commercial matters tied into that. So yeah, I don't know what else to throw out there. I'm sure we'll talk more, but I hope that's enough.
Thanks, Luka. Christina, you can go ahead as well.
Hi, everyone. I'm Christina. I'm based in Detroit, and I went to Wayne State University Law School, which is also based in Detroit. I'm a recent JD graduate that's taking the February bar, which is also coming up. And I also specialize in immigration, mostly family-based, asylum, and national interest waivers as a law clerk. So it's a little bit about me.
Thanks, Christina. Emilija, did you want to just delve into your background a little bit and open the floor?
Yeah. So I guess I'll just start from after high school. So I did my undergrad at the University of Toronto, where I majored in criminology, double minored in sociology and political science. I actually fast-tracked my courses just because of the pandemic, so I had a few months extra to just really think about what I wanted to do after. And I had some time in my last semester to look more into the legal field. I wasn't really sure if it was for me, honestly, because a lot of people in the first day of class, at U of T, like you have large classes, so it's like 1,500 people. And in my poli-sci classes and criminology classes, everyone wanted to be a lawyer. So my professors would always ask first day, who wants to become one? And everyone would put up their hand but me. And it just felt really discouraging because they would always say, look to your left, look to your right, that's your competition. So I just wanted to see what else I could do with it. And the more I took courses in it during my undergrad, I took criminal law and I took a few other courses, but I just thought I wanted to be in the legal field. So I actually applied for a paralegal program at George Brown part-time. And then after going through that, I just realized I could do more. So coming out of the pandemic, I started looking into places in the UK because during my time at paralegal school, I actually met a really nice professor who did his degree online through the University of London. And he actually held a specific seminar after one of the classes talking about how easy it was to convert your degree back into Canada once you had finished. And also the perks of even just going there to study in person. And that just really inspired me to get going and just look into a few programs there more. So I didn't want to do a whole 3-year degree either because I don't know why, but I was just really eager to like get started with work. So I thankfully found a specific senior status program at the University of London, where I actually ended up going to do my general law degree there because they actually take your undergraduate degree into account. And there I took all the general courses that I needed to take. So I took your general competition law, trial advocacy, criminal law, things like that. And I finished that this past summer in June of 2023. And now I'm working on bringing my degree back. I'll go more into my specific law school experience in a bit, but in order to bring my degree back, I had to go through the NCA process, so the National Committee of Accreditation. And there they specifically look at everything you've done up until your application, your career, your education, your grades, everything. And they just want to make sure that you meet the core Canadian competencies. So that includes 5 mandatory courses plus a program of legal research and writing. And thankfully, there are 3 programs all around Canada that actually allow you to do that. One of them is at York, one of them is at U of T, and one is at the University of British Columbia. So I decided to go back to my undergrad roots, and now I'm at the University of Toronto pursuing a global professional master's of law with a concentration in Canadian law in a global context. And that essentially not only allows me to meet all the requirements should I pass all these classes, but once I've completed all these courses, I also get the added advantage of doing a master's, having that master's degree, whereas some people choose to just opt to do some test out exams. And I just thought it was a bit easier for me this way because I actually get recognition for the work that I've done. And it's also quite fairly well paced. And it helps keep like a lot more structured way of actually learning the content. And it's great for your own reference, really. So that's just some advice I'd give to some people coming back from the UK or any other Commonwealth country. But essentially, everyone who comes from an international background has to go through that exact process. They might get more courses added on, but I only had to do the core courses. There are at least 5 courses that you'll have to do. But aside from that, it's fairly simple. And now I get to undergo the rest of the licensing process, just like any other law school graduate. So that in terms of that, it's not that hard. Going back to my law school experience, though, I would say going to the UK was so worth it. I actually thought it was a pretty good bang for my buck, considering I got the European experience within that, like within my time in law school. And when it comes to it, you're saving a whole year of your life rather than studying there, or like staying at home and studying costs the same amount as going over there for 2 years with your food and board, everything. So it actually kind of evens out. Plus you get the added experience, you can go there, experience new culture, go around. Like honestly, I would hop on a Ryanair flight at least once a month and just go see a new part of the world. It was incredible. So that was a plus in and of itself. And honestly, in terms of the content and everything, I did find it fairly similar and adaptable into Canada. Thankfully, by taking those paralegal courses first, I was entirely prepared for my first year. I essentially took all the same courses I took in my paralegal school, and all the cases were the exact same. The principles were the same. All the procedures, they may have been a little bit different, but it was nothing I couldn't really navigate. But I found it fairly like easy to get around. And my specific program had the added privilege of going on like a European immersion kind of experience where we took a week to go all around Europe and do a whole legal tour. So we went to the European Parliament, we went to The Hague, and then we actually attended a competition, an antitrust conference hosted by the American Bar Association in Copenhagen. That's how our week ended. And this was all followed up with a workshop where we actually got to pitch our own original competition class action consumer lawsuits to these large third-party investors. And it was honestly the experience of a lifetime. And I highly recommend that like people do consider going to the UK. Like there are like so many other benefits as well, aside from going to a different culture and everything. Like I found the content really easy to get around because you are coming into a place where typically people do it straight out of high school as well. So the content is kind of translated a bit down, but you still get that added benefit of being in your own postgraduate cohort. So you do get to still have that more intellectualized conversation, and the pace is just a lot easier in general. The European lifestyle, they understand the need for work-life balance. So I found like I had enough time to actually digest the content. So I think I'll just leave it at that for now, unless people have any more specific questions about the conversion process or just the UK studying life in general. But if that's all, I'll pass on to you.
Perfect. Thank you, Emilija. Now we're going to go ahead and move to Jana, who's going to talk about her experiences within the Canadian legal field, as well as her interests.
Thanks, Philip. And yeah, Emilija, that was really, really helpful. I'll start in the same way. Before law school, I did follow a path that was pretty similar to Emilija, actually. I did what I was more passionate about, which I definitely recommend you do. And it's also what brought me to Gen M. So I did a dual specialist in political science and history at the University of Toronto first. And during that time, I was also not very set on going to law school. It was just like a distant option, and I definitely didn't tailor my course load to focus on law-related courses. At the end of the day, at least in Canada, it doesn't matter what you do in your undergrad if you want to go to law school. It does not have to be even remotely close to the law, as long as it's something you're good at and you enjoy doing and you can show that. I think that's even more beneficial. After university, after my undergrad, I decided to apply to global affairs masters and law schools because I was still at that time very undecided. I took my LSAT twice. It was a very tedious and annoying process. So the LSAT, the law school entrance exam, it involves about maybe 3 months of studying. And if you're going through the LSAT process, I would recommend just doing the online tools. So maybe using Khan Academy, because that's pretty much all I used. And I found it more useful than when I went through those big books that you would need to just go through practice test and practice test. You just have to find your preferred method of studying, I think, when it comes to that. And ultimately, it's just going to be a bunch of practice tests that you repeatedly do until you get a score that you're comfortable with. And once you do, it becomes second nature. So when I took the second test, it got a lot easier than the first time around. And eventually I went to the school that I was accepted at, which was Osgoode Hall Law School in around Toronto, Canada. At Osgoode, I knew that, if I can't do global affairs, I want to do something that's international. And so I took a lot of international law-related courses, and this allowed me to specialize in international, transnational, and comparative law. In my first year, like in, I think, any other first-year law school course in Canada, you don't really specialize in anything. You take a very general course load of like core building block type courses like contract law, tort law, constitutional, and everyone more or less takes the same course load. After first year into your second year, you'll start specializing, or not even specializing, but selecting the courses that you want to tailor your education to, or you're just more interested in delving into. And I think ultimately it's probably going to benefit you the most to diversify the type of courses that you take. So maybe don't take like all criminal courses or all family or whatever it might be, because at the end of the day, you're going to have to take the bar exam, and the bar exam covers a very kind of wider variety of courses. And when you do that, if you've already taken, like, let's say family law, I took it in third year. If I've already taken it, it's the concepts when I'm studying for my bar exam are a lot clearer and familiar, and it's going to worry you a lot less when you get to that point. But that also doesn't mean don't take courses you're interested in, because I definitely did. Honestly, my course load was very heavy on international law and international humanitarian law in particular. So I don't think that detracts from anything either. And because of my specialist at Osgood allows you to take like intensive courses or clinics as well. And I was able to do a 3-month placement about 2 or so years ago, where because of COVID, I ended up doing it virtually, but it was in The Hague with the Office of the Prosecutor for the International Residual Mechanism for Criminal Tribunals for Yugoslavia. It's a long name. While I was doing that virtual placement, I was able to remotely support a team of attorneys at the immediate office of the prosecutor. And there we were assisting national war crimes investigators in the former Yugoslavia, conducting research on investigative case files, summarizing a lot of witness testimonies. And mostly what I did was focus on witness credibility and military and police command structures and cooperation. I also, they have you do little online forum posts where I did research on the use of something like adjudicative facts for the mechanisms database, and it just helps train national prosecutors as well. So I found that placement really rewarding. And I think in any university you go to, if you have the ability or the opportunity to go and do a clinic or an intensive course, I highly, highly recommend it, because I think you get a lot more hands-on experience, and you just learn more from being there. I also have to say, I agree with Emilija that the European way of working focuses on work-life balance a lot more than we do here in North America. So that was also really nice to see. The people were incredibly helpful, kind, and very respectful. And so currently I'm just in the process of completing my articling placement. I still have a few months to go. I've worked in business immigration law very briefly, and also in personal injury law. They're both very new to me, but it kind of goes to show, like, if you're dedicated enough, I think if you want to work hard and you're willing to find something you're interested in, the placement's going to go a lot smoother. And so I'm very grateful of having a good team to work around, which has helped it go quite smoothly. And so now, yeah, I'm in the process of taking my barrister and solicitor exams, which, if you're in Canada and you want to be a lawyer, you have to obtain your license, usually through that mechanism. And yeah, hopefully I can still explore international humanitarian law concepts, and maybe in the academic realm more than actually working in it. But in life, in general, I think you do have to move with the flow and kind of be ready where it takes you, because it might not have been what you initially intended, but you have to have faith that it's going to work out and kind of maintain your interest in that. And if it's not for you, then obviously, keep moving forward. But you'd be surprised that the types of things you learn in your undergrad or in law school that you weren't interested in, it might be what you end up working in. So think through what courses you select, I think, is my ending message.
Perfect. Thank you, Jana, for wrapping that up there. Now we're going to go ahead and give the floor to Luka Petrusevski, who's going to speak on completing the entire licensing process in Ontario, Canada, and as well as just entering the actual legal field as it pertains to the government.
A lot of good things were already said. So I appreciate the more pointed question. I think anybody who's tuning into this probably has maybe a different idea of what they want to get out of it. So I just kind of want to touch on as well, like what Jana said about going with the flow, and kind of being flexible. And like there's always going to be setbacks throughout the whole process, because the licensing process isn't really just, get out of law school and you go into articling and you kind of pass the barristers and solicitors, right? It really starts from like the educational journey at the beginning during undergrad years, and then when you get into law school and everything. And so in terms of, I guess like going through law school, I think there's a massive pressure, because I think when I first got to law school, I felt a little bit kind of confused, because you think, oh, you finally made it, then you finally figured things out, and your career is just ready and it's waiting for you on a fast track, and you've achieved your dreams. But then you quickly kind of realize that all of a sudden you need to set new goals, and there's new things that you didn't really know, and you have to start planning other things, right? And these questions about like passions and interests and like what you really want to do with your legal career and why you want to be a lawyer, all of a sudden become like very primary fixtures, I think, in your just day-to-day life, because it can be a very isolating experience trying to sort through those things. Because from the moment you step through those doors, at least like here in the Canadian context, I can't speak for the UK or the US, but there's a heavy pressure in terms of where you're going to work, right? Hire back, and how to interview, and the courses you should take to impress firms and everything. I think it's a mentally exhausting process. I can speak a lot about the application process through like the summer recruits and 1L, 2L, 3L, and like or the articling process. And then I don't know, like I can't say, I think everyone's path is different, right? A lot of people kind of idealize and aspire to kind of end up in big, one of the 7 sister firms, for example, in Toronto, right? And you quickly realize that everyone's career spins off into a totally unique direction that goes its own way. For me personally, I ended up I fielded out the articling process when I was interviewing, didn't really enjoy the options that were presented to me. Wasn't successful with the ones that I wanted, decided to kind of hang back, right? Instead of jumping into a job that I didn't want to do, or a specific field of interest that I didn't want to do, I decided, okay, why don't I peel back and just study a master's, right? Do a master's of law focused on the interest that I was really passionate about, right? Being natural resources, indigeneity, social considerations, all within the international scope. And so I went through the master's, and it was honestly kind of the best educational year of my life, because I think it took a lot of that pressure about what firm you're going to end up at and all of those kinds of questions out of the picture. And so I'm kind of like spiraling all over the place here, right? Because there's so many things to talk about. But that being said, I think the core tenet that I normally try to talk to people about is figuring out a niche and an area that you're genuinely passionate about, because it makes things a whole lot easier in terms of connecting to people and networking with people. Because even if you take all the right courses and you get all the right grades and you do everything by the book how you're supposed to do, there's this whole other hidden element of luck, and also like who and like getting in the room with the right people. And even if you know the right people, they can't guarantee you the right things. And so you kind of have to do your best to just put yourself in a position for the opportunity to come. And then once you do that, you hope kind of luck favors you in a good way. I think, again, to touch on what Jana said, is sometimes the things that you think you really want to happen and then they don't happen, and it ends up leading you in a place that's way more ideal and perfect than anything, right? So for me, I knew I kind of wanted to do something within the public interest and in the public sector. And now I did my articles at the Ministry of the Attorney General, in the Ministry of Economic Development, Job Creation and Trade, which was kind of a nice fixture for me that kind of allowed me to expand on my interests that I focused on during my master's. And, the year went by, and I think I don't want to ramble here, right? Because I feel like I'm rambling a little bit, but I think that the biggest, because you get insulated in the school system for so long, and then you join the workforce, and it's kind of just a different tone, it's a different pace, and you start, I guess I didn't know what to really expect, right? It was my first time within a legal office per se, doing real legal work, and it was all new and novel, and I think I found it so much more interesting than I thought I would, in a weird way. And so I don't know, there's tons of lessons that I learned during the articling process, and of course, like now being a first year call and making that transition into being real counsel, which in and of itself, there's a lot to unpack, right? Going from an articling student and all of a sudden to like a lawyer, and your word is, your name stands behind your words, and there's a lot to kind of live up to that. And so the pressure changes, but there's still a pressure to kind of deliver and perform in those same ways. And I'm struggling to kind of pull out more singular principles than what I've just said, right? I'm more than happy to talk about any aspect of the transition, be it the applications, the interviewing, preparing the cover letters, cold calling people, sending out cold emails. It's a lot of effort from top to bottom, and I don't think you can get away with that. And so that's why I've always been one to kind of preach about interest and kind of continuing to, try to explore your interests and your passions, because it makes those things a whole lot easier when you're talking to people you're genuinely interested in. And that's not really a cliche to say anything. So yeah, I think that's all I have for now. I'm happy to kind of talk further, right? But I think really keen to hear, what others have to say.
Thank you, Luka, for sort of your little exposition there regarding that. Very helpful. Now we're going to go ahead and open up the floor to Christina, who's going to get into her own experiences sort of working within law in the United States and what that process kind of looks like.
So from what I've heard so far, it seems like we have a similar process kind of going from the UK to Canada in the US. So I'll kind of go into my background of why I decided to do law, and then kind of the different steps to take the bar in the US. I think it's just a little bit different than Canada, so maybe that will be helpful to everyone that's here. But I went to the same school for undergrad, Wayne State University in Detroit. I was a double major in political science and global studies. I always knew I wanted to be an attorney, but I didn't know at what point in my life I wanted to do that. There's always this expectation in our community that you have to be something or do something. So I actually got waitlisted at Wayne State for their law school when I applied. I knew a professor there, and he kind of told me, I think you have some qualities that might be better somewhere else, but also later on in law. So I applied to Tufts University to be a diplomat. I don't know if you guys have heard of their program, but I got accepted. And I was kind of torn between, do I go to law school? It's always been my dream. Or do I become a diplomat because I love international law, and like, what's cooler than being a diplomat one day, right? My heart was to be a diplomat, but when you tell your Macedonian parents you want to go to diplomacy school, they're kind of like, no, I don't know. So I actually got off the wait list the same day I was supposed to pay my deposit. So I ended up going to law school, and it was a decision I still don't know if I for sure agree with, but I ended up going to law school in Detroit, and I was one of the COVID classes, so we were fully online. So imagine doing 1L with a mask. One day you're in class of the week with a mask, every other day you're online, and we had to have our cameras on. You couldn't not have your cameras on. So it was really intimidating to have to get a cold call, especially being with the last name Atanasoska. It sucked. I was always first, always panicking, but I think definitely I learned something being in the COVID class. It kind of gave us confidence that I think some people didn't have going into law school. Because of that, I was really motivated, and I ended up being the president of the law school. I wanted to bring change to the law school, something that I thought was lacking. So I actually interned my 1L year with UMD. I helped out with their international projects. kind of working on the, Michigan resolution. But I always knew I wanted to do immigration. So I actually did the asylum clinic at our law school. It's pretty competitive to get in, but I was able to get in there, and I worked on the first federal case for our law school. So it was crazy to go from, state law to federal law and really experience having someone's life in your hands, especially for immigration, international law. I think everyone knows it's like life or death, right? So that kind of encouraged me to go into immigration. My school was very competitive. It's either you did big law or you were public interest, and you kind of had to fit into a category right away. Like people could know just by your introduction, oh no, she's public interest, and it was a very heavy big law school. So I actually did, I think we call them OTCs. I interviewed my first year to do a big law job. I was actually in Macedonia, like just virtually doing these interviews, and I hated it. They looked at my resume and they were like, oh no, she's public interest, we don't want her. And then I kind of realized, instead of fitting into like what everyone wanted you to fit into, being big law, I actually went and followed my passions in public interest. And I think if I have one thing to kind of give advice to for anyone in the US, it's do what you want to do rather than trying to fit into the standards of, the legal field. Or when you network, someone's going to say, oh, you'll make more money in this field, or you won't in this field. I think you should really just focus on what you want to do, and then you can take it to any level that you want. So I actually work at an immigration law firm now. I work on national interest waivers, family-based petitions, and asylum. I'm the only one at the law firm that really likes asylum cases. They're pretty difficult in the US. We usually take only affirmative asylum cases right now, but it's really rewarding. I'm taking the bar in 1 month, and our process is a little bit different. So you kind of get out of law school, and then you decide whether you want to take the bar right away or if you're going to take a little break to take the bar, and it's offered twice. It's in July and February, and there's this really extensive character and fitness process, which I'm kind of curious to hear if Canada has the same thing, but you have to answer all these questions, where you've worked, and you don't really get cleared for 3 to 4 months. I know people who took the bar and they didn't get cleared until after they got their results. So they'll like question you, they'll reach out to your employers. If you have something that was just off in your application, they'll reach out to you, tell you to fix it. So that was nerve-wracking. I did pass it, but it's horrible. I would say, get on track from now, make sure it matches your LSAT application. They go back and look at everything. So that was one thing I think maybe that differs from Canada for the US. But then once you take the bar, you kind of just, that's it. After 2 weeks, if you pass, you get to kind of become an attorney. So I think all of it is just rewarding. And I'm here to answer any questions about, US law as well. And that's all from me.
Perfect. All right. Thank you very much, Christina. And thank you again to all of our presenters today. Now we're going to go ahead and get into some specific questions that have come up. And I'll go ahead and start off with just a few that are kind of more general, and I'll get into questions geared towards specific presenters. For the first one, what work can you find within international law or comparative international law? If anybody wants to kind of step in and answer that question.
I can try. So it's hard to find jobs in Canada that cater to international law. It's not that it doesn't exist, but I found that law schools, as helpful as their resources are, when you begin articling, at least you're trying to article in your licensing jurisdiction. So if I'm articling, I'm trying to article in Ontario, because although it's possible for you to article internationally and try to get that to translate here and get approved here, they're not very clear about that process, and it's too much of a headache, I think, to try to deal with. So I didn't even attempt at doing that. But one place that I found that was good for international law jobs, I'll link it in the chat. Honestly, it's Twitter. There's this website, I guess, or Twitter account that every time there's an opening in international law, they list it. So it's, a very helpful resource. I'll try to find the link now while the other questions are being asked, and I'll put it in the chat. But basically, that's one of the best places I've seen international law jobs being offered. Another thing is, if you're trying to work in a different jurisdiction, you may have to take the licensing process again, or at least the bar exam or some sort of conversion exam. I'm not sure how that would apply everywhere. Some places may not require it. It might depend on the capacity that you're working in that job at. But yeah, there are abundant international law jobs. They're just a little harder to find, and schools don't necessarily promote them. I think they want you to stay local. So that might be why.
Absolutely. And could we also perhaps from Christina get maybe some insight regarding international law and finding job opportunities in sort of the American job market there?
Sure. So I've always been, an advocate for international law, but one thing I noticed in the US is you can ask or tell someone you want to be an international lawyer and they'll kind of tell you like good luck. There's not that many opportunities here unless you get that first year connection with, I think each school has like one program where you would be able to apply. It's very competitive, and maybe 1 to 2 people get sent to, I think the UK, there's one program, at least at my school, maybe The Hague, but it's very competitive. I think if there was one advice I could give for people who want to study international law in the US, I would probably say, look for firms that aren't in Detroit. I would probably say like look for New York or Chicago. I think offices that have sister offices in Europe would probably be the best bet for anyone here. And then in terms of like practicing in different states, of course, you have to take the bar, or you can transfer with the new UBE bar exam. So hopefully that helps.
Perfect. And then kind of continuing regarding that niche relative to The Hague, we have another question. What was the process of getting into working for The Hague, and sort of what do you highlight as you sort of made it through that application process? Perhaps some additional insights.
Sorry, is this one for me? Or because I know Emilia also did like some sort of little research at The Hague as well. Maybe we can both touch on it.
You go for it. Honestly, it was more so like a very quick, brief visit.
Okay, you're still there.
It was for Jana, yes.
Okay, sorry. Essentially what I did, mine was through my school. So Osgoode Hall Law School offers like clinics, and they're like placements or intensive courses as well, that through the director of that clinic, I did the international law clinic. And through that director, they offered dozens and dozens of international law placements, which is fantastic. So that was another way you can probably put your foot in the door if you wanted to do international law and try to actually get some sort of internship or job or position. And what you had to do at Osgoode, at least, is I had to apply for the clinic itself and then get accepted into the clinic. And then while in the clinic, I selected which placements were on my top list, like ranked them. And then you have to separately apply to your the ones you were most interested in, and they would give you a call back if they've accepted you or not. If I'm being honest, I think one of the reasons that The Hague, the IRMCT for Yugoslavia, would be interested in me is also because of the linguistic background. They had me, I was more able to have some sort of familiarity with the culture, and maybe even like in certain circumstances, the languages being used than maybe somebody else without that background. And I'm just more familiar maybe with the events that had transpired to lead to those wars, the circumstances of those wars. But as well, I was obviously specializing in international law, and specifically had an interest in the law of war, international humanitarian law. So if you focus on your interest, it's very probable that you might be able to get that job. But basically, you apply through your clinic, and then while within your clinic, you apply again and hope that they call you back. I hope that answers that question.
Perfect. Thank you, Jana. Now we have another specific question for Emilija. When you came back to Canada to study your master's, what were universities looking for from your law school degree or resume? Some examples, things like extracurriculars, specific maybe internship experiences. And how did the grades transfer over from the UK, since the grading system in the UK is different?
So my master's was very specific in terms of it being very catered towards internationally trained lawyers and internationally educated students. So getting over that barrier of grades was no big issue. They just kind of did the conversion themselves once I sent in my official transcript. But aside from that, my program didn't specifically ask for this, but there is another program that's very similar at Osgood that asks specifically for a couple of years of proper work experience prior to getting into that program. But typically you might want to have some interest in the field. So most places still ask for, my program still asks for my CV just to see what my background and everything. I was asked to submit a personal statement as well. So a whole essay of why I wanted to go into that specific program. And aside from that, was my grades and pretty much it. Now, as for the grading system in other programs, I would probably highlight in your personal essay that your grades are according to the UK system. I always still have to add in my cover letter that my grades are in the UK system, which kind of sucks because my grades, in terms of numbers, a 70 and above is a pass. But obviously in Canada, 70 is like a B and it just goes down from there. But a 70 and plus is an A first, sorry. So even if you get an A, it still looks like a B in terms of recruiters' eyes. So you still always need to add that bit of extra information, and you unfortunately have to give them that extra step. But I know some larger universities, if you request, they may be able to provide you with either a link, some kind of document, or they might even give you a converted transcript that you might be able to submit to recruiters with the Canadian or your respective grading system. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you, Emilija. Now another specific question for Christina. How saturated is the refugee or asylum law market in Michigan? Is it very competitive there, or is there a good chance of finding a 2L paid internship within asylum law?
So I think at least for Michigan, I think there's a lot of opportunities for someone who wants to practice in asylum. But it just depends whether you're trying to work at a small firm or if you want to work at a nonprofit. I personally work at a small law firm, so we can't take every case, but we try to take cases that we know are very compelling, and that we can get a good result for the clients. I think if you're looking for a nonprofit, obviously, if you look at the job postings, they're not really great for Detroit. I think they pay really low, but sometimes the reward is better than the pay that you're going to get. If anyone is interested as a 2L or 1L in refugee or asylum, let me know. I guess depending on the school, I might be able to connect you with at least someone that I know. So I'll drop my email address in the chat. But I think that Detroit, especially with everything going on right now, is a really good place for someone who wants to practice in that field.
Perfect. Thank you, Christina. And another specific question for Luka, specifically regarding natural resources. Have you done any specific work or are planning to regarding some things related to perhaps the regulatory environment for natural resources, commodities, and things of that nature?
Thanks for the question. So back in, I really like between 2L, 3L, and my master's, I would say that like pretty much all of my interests, course selections were kind of geared towards exploring natural resources, commodities market, mining in particular, deep sea mining, also some exposure to oil. And I think that it led to a series of kind of like different research positions and kind of different consultancy opportunities, right? That were fantastic. I think that the area that I was exploring was one that is still developing in the law, which is a really exciting thing, right? Relating to, I mean, we're all aware of this kind of movement towards ESG and sustainability centered like interests, right, from a corporate perspective and like a social perspective, from local communities, right? And so a lot of the research that I was doing and the work that I was doing was centered around investigating how this area of the law is developing, particularly in the context of these emerging legal considerations relating to social expectations and social rights. Because what's so interesting is that now mining companies, for example, if they want to set up shop in some nation, right, in addition to having the legal permits, right, what they also need is kind of like to receive the social approval or social acceptance of the communities there. And so I think the reason I was so drawn to it was because of the fact that it's international in its scope, right? And so for someone that has an interest in kind of international law and international kind of matters, right, it's an easy way to kind of get exposed to human rights abuses and maybe kind of wanting to impact positive change in such a, massive industry for Canada's interests in particular. I would say that if you are interested in that area, like, please feel free to reach out to me. I'm sure that we can circulate our emails afterwards and we can talk further about it. But it's an area that, like, I'm still, I still keep up with it. I'm still interested in it. It's a small world at the end of the day too. Like, these are all the legal professionals in Toronto. What's the number? It's like 70% of mining companies in the world are incorporated here, right? And so it's kind of like a phenomenal thing, and it's really representative of Canada's interests and Canada's market. And so I think that if you're interested in doing anything relating to kind of mining or commodities, you'd find a great home here in Toronto to explore those interests, from like from the financial side to the social side to the environmental side. There's like really so many different facets to it that you can go on and explore. So yeah, please feel free to reach out to me. There's plenty of opportunities here in Toronto and abroad to kind of explore those interests, just because of it's such a big industry.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Luka. Now we're going to go ahead and get into perhaps some more general questions to kind of start off, perhaps more specifically regarding individual opportunities and as well as just the general market. What do things kind of look like regarding the presence of American JDs in Macedonia, be it on an individual level, perhaps what do those opportunities look like and where might they be, and as well as perhaps what might some general projections look like going into the future?
So I'll briefly mention, obviously, though we're at least I'm not familiar with the Macedonian legal system itself and what opportunities it might present. Law, obviously, as we know, can transcend borders. A few of us have already touched on the very international side of what we do and how it is essentially transnational in many ways, despite the licensing maybe not being so. But if you wish to practice in another jurisdiction, aside from the barrier of becoming licensed there, I'm sure that through your network, your connections, you would be able to maybe find a placement there. I know UMD really wants to purport its and promote its Birthright Macedonia program, which is really useful in the sense that it sets people up with internships. And I know one of the things that they're looking to do is to set up young lawyers, law students with internships at Macedonian law firms. So that's something that through UMD you would be able to explore to some capacity, and then maybe you can see better if that's right for you. But yeah, I say if that's where you want to be, then I'm sure the Macedonian legal system can definitely benefit from some of us over there.
If
I
could,
can jump shortly.
sorry. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
so thank you, Jana, for mentioning, and to everybody interested in UMD is providing the Birthright Macedonia program, and this year's dates are going to take place from June 28th to July 19th. And definitely we have an experience in providing internships to students into Macedonian law companies that are a large stake and are working with international cases as well, and mostly registering international companies in the country and dealing with all the issues they have. But definitely, if some of you is interested into getting more into the Macedonian law system, we can put you in touch. So the Birthright Macedonia program, for those who don't know, is a 3-week program, mostly focused on internship, but still, we do have the fun part as well. We have cultural heritage weekends and where students live together, party together, and learn more about Macedonian heritage and all the system that works over here. Definitely, we have some visits that covers the legal part, the business sector, as well as the advocacy part that we do, and the students get to know a lot of things regarding to business, to politics, to the law system in Macedonia, and etc. So we are gonna have a different info session for this year's Birthright program. So if anyone is interested, please get in touch with us, and we'll be very happy to respond as soon as possible.
Thank you, Gordon. I just wanted to add, I did the Birthright Macedonia internship experience back in 2018 at the President Ivanov's office at the time. And I learned a lot about policy, a lot about how, like the internal structure works within Macedonia as well. And I learned so much and got a lot out of that experience. So I highly recommend that you, like, if you can, like, just go for it, and like, you'll learn so much. Now, as for getting into law in Macedonia with an internationally recognized degree from a common law jurisdiction, I know that Macedonia is civil law. So in general, with common law to civil law conversions, it is a bit tricky. It's not impossible. I'm just not that familiar in terms of that process, but it is something you might want to consider before getting into a law program. But it's definitely not impossible though. Like with the UK degree, I know you can become a solicitor and almost work anywhere, but I do know the conversion processes between the two types of law are a bit tough, but definitely not impossible.
Absolutely. Thank you, Emilia, and thank you, Gordon. And with that, I think we're going to wrap up the Q&A, and as well as the entirety of the first Gen M Breaking into Law series. I want to thank all the presenters today for very generously donating their time and bringing their perspectives to the table. And for all of the individuals coming, hopefully you were able to kind of take something valuable away from this. And we're looking forward to continuing this series in the future and sort of helping out wherever we can. Thank you again, everyone. And with that, our session is going to come to a close today. Enjoy the rest of the weekend, or the rest of Sunday night at least.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.